Have you ever walked into a place where every eye told you that you didn't belong? Where the laughter wasn't music but knives, and the silence around you was heavier than any insult? This is not just a story about wealth and power, it is about the courage of a woman who stood in the storm of judgment with nothing but her dignity. The lakeside mansion of the Hale family shimmered like a palace dropped into the middle of the world. White balloons floated at the gates, golden ribbons twisting in the afternoon breeze. Luxury cars lined the drive, their engines still humming, while children in silk and satin skipped through the garden paths, laughter echoing under chandeliers that glowed even before dusk. It was Isabel Hale's birthday, the daughter of billionaire Robert Hale, and everyone who mattered in the city was here. Everyone, except the woman who now stood at the gate. Hoa Karen tightened her grip on her son Daniel's small hand. Her dress, pressed as best as she could manage, still bore faded seams that spoke of years of wear. Daniel's sneakers scuffed against the gravel, his wide eyes reflecting the chandeliers glittering in the windows. For a moment, Karen wondered if she should turn back. But she remembered the sight she'd caught from the road. A girl in a wheelchair, sitting alone on a balcony, her face pale with the loneliness of being surrounded yet unseen. Karen had felt that loneliness her whole life. She could not ignore it. "Not here," the housekeeper snapped. Catherine, tall and severe, blocked the gate with one sharp motion of her arm. Her lips curled in disdain. "This party is for Miss Hale's friends, not for people like you." A ripple of laughter drifted from the parents nearby, polished and cruel. Karen's shoulders did not drop. She smiled gently and asked, "And if I only came to offer my congratulations?" Her voice carried no bitterness, only a calm warmth that unsettled more than if she had shouted. Catherine scoffed and turned, ready to dismiss her, when a small but clear voice broke the air. "I want her to come in." Every head turned. On the balcony, Isabel leaned forward in her chair, her eyes locked onto Karen. Her voice trembled, but the words rang like a bell. The crowd fell silent until Robert Hale himself, the figure of iron and ice, appeared behind his daughter. His gaze swept over Karen and lingered. For a heartbeat, his expression was unreadable. Then he nodded once. "If my daughter wants it," he said, his tone final, "she will be the guest of honor." Gasps rose like wind through trees. Catherine's face flushed. Parents clutched their pearls and polished watches, whispering furiously, but the gate creaked open. Karen stepped forward. Gravel crunched beneath Daniel's sneakers. The whispers swelled sharper, slicing through the air. A woman muttered, "Who let someone like that in?" Another parent hissed, "What a spectacle." Karen did not flinch. Her posture was steady, her eyes warm. She was not here for them. She was here for the child who had just chosen her above them all. The gate closed behind them with a metallic thud, and the sound carried like a verdict. Hoa Karen could feel the shift in the air, the weight of every stare pressing against her back. Parents clustered near the buffet tables, crystal glasses gleaming in their manicured hands, their laughter sharper now, deliberately loud enough for her to hear. Children in polished shoes and velvet bows darted across the manicured lawn, glancing at Daniel with quick smirks before vanishing into the games arranged by hired entertainers. Catherine led Karen and her son along the stone path, as though she were ushering an intruder, her heels striking like hammers. "Stay out of the way," she hissed under her breath. "And remember, you don't speak unless spoken to." Her tone was honeyed venom, meant to humiliate in front of those already eager to judge. Karen said nothing. She adjusted Daniel's collar gently, her fingers smoothing fabric worn thin at the edges. He clutched her hand tighter, his eyes darting toward the chandeliers glowing inside the mansion, torn between awe and shame. She squeezed back, a silent reminder, we belong wherever kindness is needed. They were positioned in a corner of the yard, deliberately far from the white linen tables, close instead to the trash bins half hidden behind decorative shrubs. The air there carried the sour tang of spoiled fruit, an unspoken message carved into the arrangement. This is where you fit. Nearby, two men in tailored suits leaned close, their voices pitched just above a whisper. "She's probably here to beg," one said, his cufflinks catching the light. His companion smirked. "Or to steal something for resale. People like that don't come for free cake." They laughed softly, the kind of laughter that bruised deeper than a shout. A woman in a floral dress raised her phone subtly, snapping a picture of Karen kneeling to tie Daniel's shoe. She leaned to her friend, murmuring, "Local charity case, this will make a cute post." Her friend chuckled as she scrolled through filters. Karen heard the shudder, but she kept her focus on Daniel's shoelaces, finishing the knot with steady hands. Still, not all whispers were cruel. Across the lawn, Isabel's gaze never wavered. She sat at her decorated table beneath a cascade of balloons, her hands twisting in her lap as she watched Karen. There was hunger in her eyes, not for cake or gifts, but for connection. For someone unmasked. One child, a girl in pink tulle, pointed at Daniel's shirt and giggled, "It has a hole." The children around her erupted in laughter. Daniel froze, his cheeks flushing, his fists clenching. Karen crouched low, her voice a whisper for him alone. "It's all right, sweetheart. We're not here for them." Then, as if the universe needed to test her, a girl with perfect curls skipped by holding a slice of cake. She stopped abruptly, tilted her plate, and let frosting drip onto Karen's dress. "Oops," she said, her eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. Gasps and snickers rippled across the nearby tables. Catherine approached with exaggerated grace, napkin in hand, but instead of helping, she tugged at the hem of Karen's skirt, tearing it with a deliberate rip. "Oh, my mistake," she said, her smile dripping with mockery. Karen rose slowly, brushing the torn fabric smooth. The laughter of the parents rang behind her like brittle glass, yet her face did not falter. She looked at Daniel, his eyes brimming, and said softly, "We're okay." For a moment, silence fell not from kindness, but from unease. The crowd had expected tears, fury, or retreat. Instead, Karen stood calm, her back straight, the faintest warmth still alive in her eyes. That silence unsettled them more than any outburst could. From the balcony, Isabel leaned forward in her chair, whispering to herself words no one else could hear. "Stay. Please, stay." The entertainment system sputtered and died with a faint crackle, the giant screen flickering into black. For a moment, the music faltered, and silence rippled through the lawn. The magician hired to distract the children shuffled awkwardly with his cards, the technician fumbling with wires behind the stage, muttering about a short circuit. The crowd reacted instantly. Parents sighed in irritation, their complaints rising like a chorus. "For all this money, and it breaks? What are we even paying for?" Children groaned, some stomped their polished shoes, others whined that the games were boring. The carefully curated party, meant to dazzle, was unraveling at its seams. Karen sat quietly in her corner, Daniel's hand tucked in hers. She had seen this look before: the restlessness of children, the helplessness of adults who thought money could buy joy. She reached into her worn woven bag, fingertips brushing over the smooth wood of the doll she had carved. But then she touched something else, a long braided string, its colors faded from years of use. She turned to Daniel, her lips curving in the faintest smile. "Remember what Grandma taught us?" she whispered. His eyes lit up, and he nodded quickly. She tied the loop of string between her fingers and twisted it with practiced ease. In a few seconds, the dull braid became a star shining in her hands. Daniel gasped, his small hands clapping in delight. His joy carried further than she expected. A girl in a sparkly dress, curiosity gleaming in her eyes, drifted closer. "Can I try?" she asked hesitantly, her voice soft. Karen hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. "Of course." She guided the girl's fingers gently, helping her loop the string into a diamond shape. The girl laughed, clumsy but delighted. That laughter caught the ears of others. Within minutes, children began to gather, abandoning the silent stage and the broken screens. Their boredom evaporated as they clustered around Karen, eager to learn. The parents noticed, their conversations faltering. Some frowned, unsettled that their expensive party was being outshone by a scrap of string. A woman in pearls muttered, "Pathetic." But her eyes betrayed something else, a hint of confusion at the magic unfolding. Isabel, still watching from her balcony, leaned forward so far her nurse had to steady her chair. Her eyes widened, hands trembling against the wheels. She wanted to join. She needed to join. But before she could move, a boy in a crisp blazer stepped in front of her, whispering sharply, "Don't talk to that woman. She's strange." Dad says people like her don't belong. Isabel froze, her lips pressing thin. Karen caught at the way the girl's shoulders fell, the way her eyes dimmed. For a moment, Karen's jaw tightened, her calm mask almost cracking. But she didn't shout, she didn't confront. Instead, she raised her voice just enough for the children to hear, her tone bright and warm. Do you want to see the butterfly? She looped the string again, her fingers moving swiftly. Gasps followed as the children leaned in, eyes wide, their laughter bubbling into the air. One boy dropped the string, looked up at her in awe, and whispered, "You're really good." Karen smiled, small but genuine. It just takes practice. The crowd of children grew larger, their expensive toys forgotten. Their excitement spilled across the lawn, genuine in a way no stage act could manufacture. Parents exchanged uneasy glances, their whispers sharp. She's showing off. She's making us look foolish. Yet none of them could deny the truth. The energy of the party had shifted. Finally, Isabel wheeled herself forward, bumping awkwardly over the grass. The other kids stepped aside uncertainly, leaving a small path. Karen knelt, meeting her eyes with a gentle nod. "You start," she said, guiding Isabel's trembling fingers into the loop. Slowly, with effort, the string bent into shape. A diamond shimmered between Isabel's hands. The girl's face broke into a smile, bright, pure, and uncontainable. The children cheered, their voices filling the air, laughter rising higher than the chandeliers. Karen's eyes softened. For the first time that day, the mansion's lawn felt alive. From the corner, Catherine watched, her lips pressed thin. Parents whispered furiously, their jewels glittering as their composure cracked. But none of it mattered. Not to Isabel, not to Daniel, not to Karen. Karen looked around at the small circle of laughter she had sparked with nothing but a piece of string and patience. She glanced up at Isabel, and their eyes met in a quiet understanding that needed no words. For the first time, the wolves seemed uneasy. The laughter of children carried like bells across the garden. But not everyone welcomed the sound. For the wealthy guests, each giggle at Karen's string tricks was a reminder that their money had failed where her simplicity triumphed. Smiles grew brittle, whispers sharpened, and Catherine's eyes narrowed until they were slits of venom. Karen felt it, the hostility swelling like a tide, but she did not withdraw. She guided Isabel's trembling hands again, steady and patient, while Daniel clapped beside her. To him, his mother wasn't poor or out of place. She was magic. Then the tide struck. A girl in lace braids and ribbons approached, holding a glass of crimson juice. She paused by Isabel's chair, but turned at the last second, letting the liquid cascade onto Karen's lap. The cold splash spread across her faded dress, seeping into the fabric like a wound. "Oops," the girl said, her voice honeyed with cruelty. The crowd tittered, delighted at the humiliation. Karen dabbed the stain with a napkin, her movements deliberate, her expression calm. "Accidents happen," she murmured. Her composure only deepened their mockery. Catherine swept forward, a predator tasting blood. She stooped as if to help, but instead seized the torn hem of Karen's skirt and yanked, ripping fabric with a sharp, echoing tear. "Oh my, so fragile," she sneered, holding the scrap aloft like a trophy. Gasps broke from some guests, but many laughed, the sound jagged as broken glass. Daniel's fists balled, his cheeks hot with shame. Karen knelt quickly, cupping his face. "Hey, look at me, we're okay," she whispered. His eyes welled, but he nodded, clinging to her hand. For a long heartbeat, silence fell. The partygoers leaned forward, waiting for the outburst that would finally prove them right, that she was nothing but a bitter intruder. But it never came. Karen stood, smoothing what remained of her dress, shoulders square, eyes soft yet unyielding. The restraint unsettled them. The wolves wanted to scream. Instead, she gave them silence that echoed louder than their laughter. But cruelty wasn't finished. A waiter passed by carrying a tray of soda. He stumbled deliberately, and the glasses tipped, icy liquid splashing across Karen's arms and torso. The crowd gasped, then erupted in laughter, some covering their mouths, others clapping at the performance. "Clumsy me," the waiter grinned, but his smirk faltered when Karen met his eyes. Her voice was steady. I hope you're more careful with things that matter. She brushed the soda from her skin, then bent to wipe Daniel's sticky hands, her calmness burning brighter than rage. Whispers rose in waves. Why doesn't she leave? She must love the attention. Pathetic. Staying here in ruins. Yet, among the children, the mood was different. Isabel's small hands clutched the string tighter. One boy whispered, almost ashamed, "Why are they so mean to her?" The cruel spectacle had reached its peak. And then, everything shifted. Robert Hale, silent until now, rose from his place at the head of the table. His tall figure commanded attention. The laughter sputtered into silence. His gaze swept the crowd before landing on Karen. The air tightened. "You're Ho Karen," he said, his voice quieter than expected, yet heavy as stone. Karen looked up, eyes steady. "Yes." Robert's jaw flexed. His next words dropped like thunder. "3 years ago, when my factory burned, when the smoke turned night into day and no one came back for me, it was you who pulled me out." A gasp rippled across the lawn. The crowd froze, forks suspended, glasses trembling. Catherine paled, her hands tightening on the scrap of torn fabric until her knuckles blanched. Robert continued, each word deliberate. "You were just a waitress. You had no reason to risk yourself. Yet you dragged me through fire, your hands burned, your voice steady. I never knew your name until today." Eyes darted from Robert to Karen, horror dawning on faces that had sneered and mocked. The woman they had called beggar, thief, charity case, she had once carried their idol through flames. Daniel looked up at his mother, pride swelling in his small chest. Isabel, tears shining in her eyes, wheeled forward, reaching for Karen's hand. "You're my friend," she said, her voice breaking. "The first real one I've ever had." Karen knelt, her torn, stained dress brushing the grass, and took the child's hand. "And I'll stay," she whispered, "as long as you need me." The crowd sat paralyzed, the weight of truth pressing them into silence. The wolves, for once, had no teeth. The garden no longer echoed with laughter. The air was heavy, choked by the silence of people who had been unmasked. The chandelier light pouring through the windows suddenly felt harsh, exposing every painted smile, every cruel whisper still hovering in the air. Robert Hale remained standing, his voice having already carved a scar into the crowd. He said no more, but the revelation lingered like smoke, clinging to silk dresses and tailored suits. The same parents who had sneered minutes earlier now avoided Karen's eyes, their glasses trembling as they lifted them to their lips. Catherine tried to recover first. She smoothed her apron and forced a brittle laugh. "Well, people exaggerate stories in a fire," she muttered, as though words could erase truth. But Robert's cold gaze sliced through her excuse. She fell silent, her face drained of its usual authority. Karen stood quietly, her hands still holding Isabel's. She hadn't asked for Robert's recognition, hadn't wanted to be anyone's savior. Her only purpose was this little girl whose smile now glowed brighter than every candle on the untouched cake. Yet the more Karen remained still, the more the crowd squirmed under their own weight. At one table, a man tugged his tie loose, whispering urgently to his wife, "This could ruin us if anyone repeats what we said." His wife pressed her lips tight, her eyes darting nervously toward the cameras in guests' hands. Another woman lowered her phone quickly, deleting the photo she had snapped of Karen earlier, suddenly aware that cruelty could go viral faster than any apology. The children sensed it too. They drew closer to Karen, their polished shoes rustling over the grass. A boy who had mocked Daniel earlier shuffled awkwardly, then offered the string back to him, mumbling, "I'm sorry." The word was clumsy, but Daniel's eyes lit with cautious relief. Not everyone softened. A woman in velvet hissed to her friend, "So what if she saved a life? She's still poor." But her friend did not answer. Shame kept her quiet. Slowly, the circle of Karen's detractors began to collapse inward, their voices dull, their presence shrinking in contrast to the calm radiating from the corner where she stood. Catherine made one last attempt to regain control. She marched toward Karen, chin high, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Enough sentiment. This party must continue with dignity. Step back, Miss Collins." But Isabel's voice pierced the air, fragile yet commanding. "Number. She stays with me." All eyes turned to the child. Isabel's small hand clutched Karen's tighter, her defiance more powerful than any diamond necklace on the lawn. Robert's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something resembling respect. He gave the faintest nod, and Catherine froze where she stood. The rest of the evening unfolded under a strange hush. The musicians resumed playing, but their notes sounded hollow. Waiters moved stiffly, careful not to draw attention. Parents tried to restart conversations, yet their words fell flat, punctured by guilt. For the first time, the wealth that usually insulated them offered no protection. Karen did not bask in it. She sat with Isabel and Daniel, cutting a slice of cake for the children, her hands steady, her smile soft. To her, nothing had changed. She had not won or conquered. She had simply endured. And that endurance, quiet and unshaken, was what unsettled the wolves more than anything. When the party ended, guests hurried to their cars, their designer shoes clicking nervously against the stone. Catherine vanished into the mansion, her authority shattered. Robert lingered a moment, watching Karen guide Daniel toward the gate. His lips parted, as though to speak, but no words came. Instead, he inclined his head in a gesture rare for a man like him. Karen returned it with the smallest nod. She did not need gratitude, only truth. And the truth had already done its work. The facade of perfection had cracked, and no one in that mansion would ever forget the sound. 1 month later, the city's grand ballroom glittered under 1,000 lights. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and violins swelled through the air, as if to remind everyone that this night was meant for elegance. The annual charity gala was the crown jewel of the season, yet this year, every eye was drawn not to the gowns or the diamonds, but to the woman who entered quietly through the side doors. Hoa Karen wore a simple navy dress, carefully mended at the seams, her hair pulled back with modest grace. At her side walked Daniel, his shirt crisp and clean, his small chest puffed with pride. They looked out of place against the silks and jewels, but their presence commanded a different kind of attention, the kind that comes from whispered stories and lingering guilt. As they stepped into the golden light, the crowd parted instinctively. Conversations faltered, glasses lowered, and the echo of their shoes across the marble floor filled the silence. Karen kept her head high, her expression calm. She was not here to perform, not here to seek redemption from people who had mocked her. She was here because Isabel had asked. Near the stage, Isabel sat in her wheelchair, her lap decorated with flowers, her smile brighter than the chandeliers. When she spotted Karen, her eyes lit with uncontainable joy. "You came," she whispered, the words trembling but strong enough to carry across the table. Karen knelt to meet her, placing a hand over Isabel's. "Of course I did," she said softly. "Friends keep their promises." The gala's host tapped his glass, and the room hushed. Robert Hale stepped to the podium, his dark suit sharp against the white marble, his presence commanding in the way only power and survival could shape. For a long moment, he said nothing. His gaze swept the crowd, settling briefly on Catherine's former employers and the parents who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then his eyes landed on Karen. "Many of you know me as a man of wealth," Robert began, his voice steady but edged with something raw. "But few of you know that 3 years ago, my life was not saved by fortune or by status. It was saved by a woman who had no reason to risk herself. She was a waitress, unseen in the smoke and chaos, but she pulled me from the fire when no one else would." The ballroom stilled. Forks hovered above plates, breath caught in throats. He gestured toward Karen. "That woman is here tonight. Her name is Hoa Karen, and she has reminded me and my daughter that dignity and courage are worth more than all the gold we can gather." A murmur swept the room, half awe, half shame. Some clapped tentatively, others bowed their heads. A few looked away, remembering too clearly their cruel words from the birthday party. Karen did not bask in the applause that followed. She stood quietly beside Isabel, her hand still resting on the girl's shoulder. To her, the noise was meaningless. The only sound that mattered was Isabel's small voice whispering, "I'm glad you're here." After the speech, guests approached Karen, some with apologies, others with rehearsed smiles of admiration. One woman, her gown glittering with sequins, lowered her eyes and said softly, "I was at the party. I'm sorry." Karen's reply was gentle, almost freeing. It's all right. What matters is what we do next. The night ended not with champagne toasts, but with Karen and Daniel stepping back into the cool night air. The stars shimmered above, reflecting on the dark water of the lake nearby. Daniel squeezed her hand tightly. "Mom," he whispered, "you were the bravest one in the room." Karen smiled, lifting her gaze to the sky. She did not feel brave. She had only done what she always had, stood steady in a storm of judgment. Yet perhaps that was bravery after all. The streets outside the ballroom were quiet. The city's glitter dimming into the soft hum of night. Hoa Karen walked with Daniel at her side, their footsteps echoing softly against the cobblestones. She carried no prize, no grand trophy to prove her worth, only the warmth of her son's small hand nestled in hers. Behind them, the gala's lights shimmered like distant stars, but Karen did not look back. She had never lived for applause, and she would not start now. Her strength was not forged in ballrooms or measured by the weight of jewels. It was born in the silence of enduring mockery, in the calm she carried when the world demanded her shame. Daniel glanced up at her, his eyes wide with wonder. "Mom," he whispered, "are you happy?" Karen smiled, the kind of smile that held sorrow and triumph in equal measure. "Yes, sweetheart. Because we didn't bow our heads. We walked through it together." For a long while, they walked under the moonlight, the lake beside them glimmering like silver glass. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of blossoms. Karen breathed deeply, each step lighter than the last. She had not needed Robert's recognition, nor the crowd's belated respect. The truth had always been hers, and now it had spoken loudly enough for the world to hear. Her silence had been her shield, her dignity, her victory. In the eyes of strangers, she might still be poor, still out of place. But in Daniel's eyes, and in Isabel's smile, she was everything, and that was enough.